Travel all over the countryside, ask the Leylands, ask the Leylands. Travel all over the countryside, ask the Leyland brothers. Whatever it is that you want to see, ask the Leylands, ask the Leylands. No matter whatever that happens to be, ask the Leyland brothers. Come on, be in it and join in the fun. Travel all over Australia.
Our first story comes from Robinvale here in Victoria. There we have a look at olive growing and the olive industry in Australia. Then we go to Caloundra in Queensland here to have a look at a man who works with matchsticks. He has a fantastic collection of matchstick models. And then we take a look at the history of Australia, or at least a very tragic part of that history. The story of the Burke and Wills expedition and its last days here out on the Coopers Creek.
If you're like me, you probably associate olives with the Mediterranean countries. But in fact, we produce olives here in Australia. In fact, right here at Robinvale in Victoria. And we found out about that, and we're going to look at the olive story because of this letter from Denise Phillips from Mildura. In fact, right now we're parked in the middle of an olive orchard.
There are two types of olives grown here at the Olive Home Plantation, eating olives and oil olives. The plantation covers over 200 hectares, and all trees are watered by underground drip feed pipes. Fertilisers are also fed to the trees through the irrigation pipes. The trees are about 6 years old before they start producing commercial crops of olives. Olive Home manager Philip Henry explains some details about olive growing.
There are many kinds of olives. Those are green ones, and also you've got some fully ripe ones. So an olive starts off green and ends up black when it's fully ripe. And then you have two main kinds of olives, the ones that are just small and are mainly used for oil because they have just a lot of oil in them, whereas these table olives, and this is a variety of table olives, they have a lot of water in them and grow to a big size but not so much oil. Now these are table olives that we've got here. With olives you've got to pick them two different ways. Oil olives, because they're going to be crushed to make olive oil, we can just shake the trees and get the fruit off easily. But with table olives like these, we must make sure that there's no bruising of the fruit, and so we have special plastic picking buckets. The pickers are provided with gloves so their fingernails won't damage the fruit, and then the fruit can be picked off into the buckets without any damage to the fruit at all, stripping it down as I'm doing here now.
When olive oil is to be extracted, this mechanical shaker grips the tree and shakes the ripened olives onto large plastic drop sheets. The olives for crushing are first put through a riddle cleaner, which removes any unwanted leaves and sticks. Then the conveyor drops the olives into a washer. The olives are then ground up in a machine like an oversized coffee grinder. This paste includes the seed, which helps to keep the paste open and allow the oil to separate more easily. This centrifugal extractor spins the olive paste like a spin dryer of a washing machine, and the oil is forced out, leaving the fruit solids behind. The cake from the centrifugal extractors still contains some oil, so it is spread onto circular press mats, which are built into a tower of mats on a trolley and placed under a press. This presses out the remaining oil and fruit water.
This is our virgin olive oil that's stored in the tanks behind us, and that's produced straight from the factory into the tanks. And I mentioned the word virgin olive oil. People ask what that is. That means that it's been extracted just by machine, no chemical treatment at all. Whereas non-virgin olive oil or pure olive oil has had some chemical treatment. We would be one of the few people still producing olive oil in Australia. Our main production now has gone to table olive production.
The olives destined for table consumption are placed in large brine tanks outside the factory. The olives remain in the brine solution for about 4 months, during which time fermentation takes place, converting the sugar in the olives to lactic acid. The processed olives are carefully graded and sorted for size. The final stage of the process is a hand sorting and packing. If a proper fermentation has taken place, the olive should be firm but not tough, and the flesh should come away easily from the stone.
This is the Leyland Way, just north of the holiday centre of Caloundra on Queensland's Sunshine Coast. An eye-catching sign attracts our attention.
The humble match. We use it once and throw it away. We've come to meet a man who does more than that. We've come here at the request of M. Knight of Southport in Queensland. Recently I was up staying on the Sunshine Coast and we visited a place that would make a good program. It is called the World of Matchcraft and is very interesting. There is a large display of the Spanish Armada and many interesting other articles made from matches. The owner was building a paddle steam all to scale. It should be finished very soon. Thank you for your very interesting programs. Well, thank you for being interested in our programs. We're going to have a look at the World of Matchcraft and meet the owner, Len Hughes. All the matches that Len uses in the models, everything is just done in one layer. There's no solid object inside. It's all built up with matches. Now, Len, how many matches have you got in the Dutch windmill?
There's approximately 34,000 matches in the windmill altogether.
And how long did it take to build such a...
Well, it took 8 weeks to build that one.
And the weight of these is what amazes me. This is the one you're working on now. It's just sort of so light, isn't it?
Well, people are under the impression that there's balsa. It's so light that it's just like balsa, but it is nothing but matches and glue. There's nothing under there whatsoever but matches and glue.
And how long have you been making match models?
12 years, and in the whole display here there'll be something like 9 years' work. Underneath here, the roof, pulls out, and we have the fitting that comes off the electric motor, all made from matches. It's electric driven, but that's the coupling that's used to drive the blades of the windmill.
The strength of the glued matches is amazing. This windmill turns continuously during the hours the display is open. Len is always improving the display with new models. His workshop is inside the main entrance, so that visitors can see just how the models are made.
What I'm working on here is the model of the Great Western. Now this is the vessel that was launched back in 1837, 38, to travel between, took the route off the sailing vessels to travel between England and America back in them early days. It's a side paddle vessel, and it was the beginning of the paddle era. A lot of people always ask me how I bend the matches. It's quite a simple technique after you've done it for a while. Just with a knife blade, you just cut them in like that. They bend, usually cut a few in halves. Then to bend them completely, you break their back so that when you put them on, they'll stick and won't spring back. You glue on the boat like this, and there it is.
Len became interested in matchwork after he saw an exhibition of school children's matchwork on carrying trays back in 1967 when he lived at Muswellbrook in New South Wales. Len says he likes a challenge, and each article he makes is more difficult than the last. He started with used matchsticks, but now uses so many he has to use new ones. They are called splints at this stage before they have the phosphorus heads. When 4 matches are glued together like this, they are extremely strong and flexible.
This is a mast for the boat. It fits here, and these pieces here now are for the cross arms that fit across the mast. And they're made up of 4 matches thick, and to round them off I use a little plane to start off with. Take the rough corners off, and then finish it down with the sandpaper. And it's rounded.
This working guitar is Len's pride. He says professional musicians are amazed at its quality sound. There is no limit to Len's imagination. Matchcraft models from chess sets to aeroplanes fill the display cases. They are all accurate to the minutest detail, including moving parts where possible. The one single display in Len's collection which leaves visitors awestruck is the 331 vessels in the Spanish Armada. This action display covers a huge area and took Len 2 years and 8 months to make the models. He used 243,000 matches, not to mention many litres of glue. An enormous amount of broken windscreen glass creates the rough sea. The whole collection of articles on display totals over 1 million matches. This model of a typical Mississippi paddle boat is 2.5 metres long. Len's next big project is to be a 4 metre long model of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. As he says, he likes a challenge.
Well, Len Knight of South Point, as you can see, Len Hughes has finished his paddle steamer. It took 5 months of work and 83,000 matches. And that's a lot of work and a lot of patience to think he started off with a small thing like an ordinary match and ends up with a beautiful model like this. And thanks for writing to us at Leyland Brothers.
This is the Cooper, Cooper's Creek in Queensland. Normally the Cooper doesn't flow quite as high as we see it here. In dry times, it's a series of waterholes, deep waterholes forming a chain along the bed of the Cooper. It's been like this for centuries. In fact, in 1861, it was much drier than it is now. But in 1861, it was the most important spot, particularly this waterhole right in front of me. because this is the site of Camp 65 of the Burke and Wills expedition. And we've come to this site to take a look at the story of Burke and Wills. Many people have written in to our program, especially children, wanting to know what the dig tree looks like. Well, the dig tree is located just up here on the bank. On one side it says Camp 65, and on the other side, the famous dig message.
Burke and Wills, together with King and Gray, had trekked into the Gulf of Carpentaria from here, and on the terrible return journey, Gray died. The other three pushed on after 4 months' absence, expecting to rejoin a backup party left here to await their return.
It's hard to imagine what thoughts would have been in the minds of Burke, Wills and King as they staggered into this spot. And they really would have staggered because they would have been just about totally exhausted. In fact, it would have been the thought of Cooper's Creek here and all that water and the friends and the food that would have really kept them going, I imagine. But then to get here and find it abandoned, can you imagine the despair? Well, they wandered around for a while, feeling really down, until somebody noticed here on this very tree a sign, just here, which said to dig 4 feet west. Well, that would have been around about here, I imagine, somewhere. Because then those days the tree naturally would have been a lot smaller than it is now. You can see from the depth of the bark that's grown on it in the last 100 odd years. But they would have dug down there and then found the food and all the supplies that they needed to keep them going for a while. But the tragic part, of course, is that when they read that sign and saw the date, the 21st of April, 1861, then it really dawned on them. That was the very same day that they had arrived here. The party that had been waiting here for months for the return of their leaders had left the same day that they got here, only hours before, in fact. And on this side of the tree here, again we can see just how deep the bark is there. This will give you an idea of how much the tree has grown since it was originally blazed. And on there we can just make out LXV in Roman numerals, of course, which means 65 for Camp 65. Apart from the dig tree itself and this beautiful stretch of water, there's another attraction here, and that's this tree. It's about 40 metres from the dig tree, and it has this carving on it. The carving was made in 1898 by 2 travelling wood carvers who passed by this way. They too must have been inspired by the story of Burke and Wills, which of course then was only some 30 odd years old. And here, in a similar tree to the dig tree, they've carved a likeness of Burke's face.
Burke, Wills and King, refreshed with supplies, set off downstream along the Cooper Creek. In 1861, though, it was mostly dry desert sand. They were headed for Mount Hopeless in South Australia, 150 miles away. They were expecting to reach a settlement there, but were too weak to make it. The 3 remaining camels died, and they finally turned back to Camp 65 once more. This return trek eventually killed Burke and Wills, but how different it may have been if the Cooper was like this, an oasis in the desert surrounded with wildflowers and animal life. Today's visitors to this region have roads to follow with few obstacles. But of course, the sandy country can easily bog a truck. After an hour's hard digging, we should be mobile once more. Once on the move again, we can travel into South Australia and onto the other historic sites of the Burke and Wills saga. This is the spot where the marker has been erected to tell us that it was near here that William John Wills, second in command of the Burke and Wills expedition, died about June 29th, 1861. It was along this creek bed that Burke pushed a little further towards Camp 65, by now in a terrible state.
By the time Burke reached this point on Cooper's Creek, heading back towards Camp 65, he could go no further. He was totally exhausted. In fact, he wouldn't have even reached this spot had it not been for the fact that King had sort of forced him to go on. But here he collapsed. He simply couldn't go any further. He propped up against this tree here, presumably, and there he died. Before he died, his last wish to King was that he didn't bury him, that he leave him propped up against a tree, and strangely, he asked that King place his pistol in his right hand. Perhaps that was the last act of showmanship on the part of Robert O'Hara Burke. The final stages of the Burke and Wills drama may not have been known except for the fact that there was a survivor, and that of course was John King. King was kept alive for about 3 months after Burke died by the friendly Aborigines up along the Cooper here. Now this section of the Cooper is where he was discovered. This is about 5 or 6 kilometres downstream from the current township of Inaminka. And it was just in this creek bed, living with the Aborigines, that a member of the Howitt expeditionary party that had gone to look for the Burke and Wills expedition discovered King living here. And that more or less concludes our look at the Burke and Wills expedition and the tragedy which took place here so many years ago.
Travel all over the countryside, ask the Leylands, travel all over the countryside, ask the Leyland brothers. Whatever it is that you want to see, ask the Leylands, no matter whatever that happens to be, ask the Leyland brothers.